Hello again to another Agakala React, and today we'll be watching 10 movies that brilliantly avoided huge cliches from what culture. And those videos about movies from what culture, they're usually pretty good, so let's just watch and see what kind of cliches do the movies avoid. And have I noticed them? Or if I've even seen the movie.
Once you've seen hundreds or even thousands of films, it can become tough for a movie to surprise you. There are only so many things a movie can do to skirt the ordinary, and in the interest of delivering a safely fun time, which a lot of movies prioritize these days, most films will cling to tried and tested tropes and cliches, and so it's great fun when a rare movie dares to break the firmly established mold and nimbly sidestep a massively played out genre cliche. I'm Ewan, you're watching What Culture, and here are 10 movies that brilliantly avoided huge cliches. Number 10. K isn't the chosen one. Blade Runner 2049. From fairly early
Yeah, that
on
was a surprise in
Blade
it.
Runner
I was
2049,
surprised.
It seems like it's gonna do the incredibly boring and obvious legacy sequel thing of making the new protagonist, Replicant K, played by Ryan Gosling, the child of prior protagonist Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, and of course his lover Rachel, who was portrayed by Sean Young. And if K were indeed the first child of a human and a replicant, it would basically make him an extremely important chosen one-like figure in the resistance movement for replicant freedom. But in the third act of Blade Runner 2049, K learns that Deckard and Rachel's child is female, and more to the point, they're a relatively minor character who only appears briefly earlier in the story, Dr. Anna Stelline, played by Carla Juri. This was a fantastic subversion of expectations, leading audiences to expect another generic everything is connected hero's journey, only to reveal that K isn't the special one, but can still make a difference and have agency through his own actions, not merely because of who his parents are. It's super refreshing in a Hollywood landscape dominated by belated sequels that are somehow all hopelessly obsessed with creating sappy, convoluted familial links between new characters and old. Number 9. The Cavalry Gets Gunned Down. Collateral. Michael Mann's brilliant thriller Collateral seems to make it pretty clear early on that embattled Cabby Max, played brilliantly by
haven't
Jamie
seen this
Foxx,
one yet.
is gonna get a big assist from LAPD.
Oh my god, that's Mark Ruffalo?
Played by Mark Ruffalo. When it comes to escaping from and taking down ruthless assassin Vincent, played also brilliantly by Tom Cruise, Fanning is shown to be a smart and resourceful cop who figures out that Vincent's victims are all witnesses in a federal grand jury case. So, going by filmmaking convention, why wouldn't he save the day? But midway through the film, when Fanning seemingly saves Max from a chaotic nightclub shootout, Fanning is suddenly gunned down in cold blood by Vincent, who swiftly forces Max back into his cab. With Max's only viable ally now dead, it falls to him to save the day himself, which he eventually does. Even so, given how the film built Fanning up, this was a glorious obliteration of expectations that only further cemented Vincent's utter lack of regard for, well, anything but the job. Number 8. Explosions hurt. A lot. The Other Guys. Oh, I love The Other Guys. I
haven't seen that either for some reason. I know it's a comedy, but
spends most of its runtime making fun of the most tired, played out elements of that genre. And perhaps the biggest laugh of all, at least when Michael Keaton isn't on screen because he is brilliant in this movie, comes when cop protagonists Gamble and Hoyt, Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg respectively, walk up to an accountancy firm only for the building to suddenly explode in their faces. Now, typically in these sorts of movies, an explosion won't do too much to phase the heroes, but in a gut-bustingly realistic twist, Gamble and Hoyt are sent flying to the floor and start screaming and writhing around in pain. Gamble mentions that his hearing is shot and he's got blisters on his hand from the explosion, before straight up calling out movies themselves, like, how they walk away in movies without flinching when it explodes behind them? No way! We're so used to seeing heroic characters just walk away from explosions, and I love that, but to see one of them writhing in pain on the ground and begging for an MRI was a twist both ingenious and hilarious. Seriously, go watch The Other Guys. That movie is a riot. Number 7. Beck is a good guy. The Negotiator. It's always a hoot when movies toy with our preconceptions of an actor and the types of roles they tend to play, and The Negotiator did that quite wonderfully with David Morse. Morse has had an incredibly fruitful career playing hard-ass characters and card-carrying villains. Think 16 Blocks, for example. That's just the aura he carries as an actor, and it's evidently served him well. And so, when he shows up as ill-tempered SWAT Commander Beck in the movie and starts clashing with hero Chris Sabian, played by Kevin Spacey, we're basically conditioned to assume that he's going to end up being the secret villain who has framed Danny Roman, played by Samuel Jackson. Beck really seems strangely keen to kill Roman
want to
for
watch
a
this
large
movie
chunk
now.
of the movie, and so why wouldn't he be the twist villain? Except he isn't. He's simply an impatient, ill-mannered, bloodthirsty cop who believes that Roman is guilty, which really shouldn't have been that big a surprise, but hey-ho. And better yet, Beck even gets a moment of glory at film's end when he prevents the real antagonist, Frost, played by Ron Rifkin, from killing himself. Oh, not many people saw that one coming, I bet. Number 6. The guy doesn't get the girl. The Last American Virgin. Oh, The Last American Virgin, a seemingly dead ordinary 80s boner comedy that was absolutely
even
positively
heard about
going
that
to end
movie.
with timid high schooler Gary, played by Lawrence Monason, getting the girl of his dreams, the lovely Karen, played by Diane Franklin. This is hammered home by the film's efforts to depict Gary as a nice guy in stark comparison to Gary's sexist pal Rick, played by Steve Antin, who ends up getting Karen pregnant and then immediately dipping out of her life. Gary conversely helps Karen pay for an abortion at great cost to himself, and as the pair seem to grow close, she invites him to her 18th birthday party. But when he turns up in the film's final scene, he enters the kitchen to find Karen making out with Rick, the pair having apparently made up. An emotionally destroyed Gary simply leaves the party and drives home in tears as the end credits roll, and that's all she wrote.
Okay.
What a weird bummer of a movie. Given that sex comedies are basically duty-bound to leave their hormonal audience on a giddy high, this one was a bit of a shocker. Number 5. Daniel and Miranda stay divorced. Mrs. Doubtfire. Think of basically any mainstream pre-2000s movie centered around divorce, and the overwhelming majority of them will end with the estranged couple getting back together for a crowd-pleasing happy ending. And that certainly seemed to be on the cards for a movie as
can't remember what's
broad-skewing
happening.
as Mrs. Doubtfire.
I have
That
seen it
Miranda,
so long
played by
ago.
Sally Field, and Daniel, played of course by Robin Williams, would reconcile for the sake of their suffering kids. Except that's not what happens at all. The film ends with Miranda and Daniel remaining divorced, but on much better terms, which is surprisingly given what Daniel actually did. If you think about it too much, your brain will leak out of your ears. And even more surprisingly though, Miranda's new partner Stu, played by Pierce Brosnan, isn't made out to be a villain of any kind. He's a charming, super likable guy all the way to the end. Just a poor victim of drive-by fruitings. It's since been revealed that Mrs. Doubtfire indeed originally ended with Miranda and Daniel getting back together, but Sally Field and Robin Williams, both of whom had been divorced in real life, felt that this was a disingenuous note to end the movie on, and would send the wrong message to children of divorce. And so, director Chris Columbus rightly made the call to end on a more authentic, left field note, and honestly, Mrs. Doubtfire is way stronger for it. Number 4. Revenge isn't easy. Blue Ruin. Jeremy Saulnier's taut thriller Blue
Another
Ruin
movie I
is
never heard about.
basically a feature-length exercise in taking the revenge movie formula and turning it brilliantly inside out. The film follows Dwight, played by Macon Blair, a man who embarks on a quest to kill the man who apparently murdered his parents 2 decades earlier. But there's absolutely nothing badass about Dwight's violent crusade. Blue Ruin considers what it would be like if a regular person with limited weapons experience wanted to extract a pound of flesh, a fact best embodied by a mid-film scene where Dwight ends up shot in the leg with a crossbow, forcing him to perform self-surgery. Except, rather than the hero tidily patching himself up as expected, Dwight's attempt to remove the crossbow from his leg only makes things worse, causing blood to gush from the wound, prompting him to groggily go to the hospital and let the professionals do the job instead. If there's a lot of love for competence porn movies, basically films which focus on a character who is extremely skilled at something going about it, Blue Ruin is basically the opposite. A savage story all about how utterly ill-equipped the average person is to wreak vengeance of any kind. Number 3. Glass tables don't break. Game night. It's a cliche of action films that basically everything in the vicinity is extremely fragile and breakable during a fight scene. Because, more often than not, it looks really damn cool. We've all seen dozens of movies where a character is thrown onto a glass table during a fight and it just explodes like... But in reality, they're usually a good deal more sturdy than that.
It's not just
and
glass.
The terrifically entertaining 2019 action comedy Game Night has great fun illustrating this fact, as on 2 separate occasions, characters are thrown onto a glass table only for it to just not break at all. The second instance even results in Kevin, played by Lamorne Morris, hilariously quipping, "Glass tables are acting weird tonight." While it's totally understandable that action movies love breaking glass tables because frankly it just looks amazing, Game Night went unexpectedly out of its way to point out just how unrealistic this incredibly common trope actually is. Number 2. Ozymandias' villain monologue, Watchmen. Oh, there's nothing more frustrating.
Oh, that's why I got that video, because the Ozymandias, it's on the thumbnail.
What they're going to do and how there's nothing the hero can do to stop them. Of course,
remember, that movie is
always
awesome.
can
Not this,
and will.
The Watchmen.
Enter Watchmen, which climaxes with Adrian Veidt, aka Ozymandias, revealing that he's orchestrated all the very bad things that have happened throughout the movie. And his final gambit involves detonating a series of nuclear reactors across the world, killing 50 million people. Personally, I preferred the squid, but I digress. More to the point, he intends to frame Dr. Manhattan for it, in turn uniting the US and USSR against a common alien entity. Once Veidt finishes his speech, a shocked Rorschach and Night Owl attempt to stop him putting his plan into action, only for him to reveal that, far from a cliched comic book villain, he triggered the explosions 35 minutes earlier, and there's nothing they can do to stop them. This is technically a comic book cliche, so you can't really give the movie credit, but despite my misgivings with the adaptation, this was diabolically refreshing to see on the big screen. And number 1, there's no final showdown. No Country for Old Men.
Haven't seen it again. I hear it.
Brilliantly executed as No Country for Old Men is, on an initial viewing, it nevertheless seemed to be headed towards an incredibly typical final showdown between our hero, Llewellyn Moss, played by Josh Brolin, and the ruthless killing machine Anton Chigurh, played brilliantly by Javier Bardem. But in a wonderfully bewildering end of second act twist, Moss is unexpectedly killed off screen, not by Chigurh, but by a group of Mexicans who have been following him. And it gets even better, as the audience is then led to believe that Sheriff Ed Tom Bell, played by Tommy Lee Jones, will take over from Moss and be the one to take Chigurh down. Except, he just doesn't. The film instead ends with Bell retiring and effectively admitting to himself that he hasn't got what it takes to deal with the likes of Chigurh, who manages to escape into the night with all that dinero. The Coen brothers' slippery approach left some casual-minded audiences pretty underwhelmed, but damn if it wasn't a trip to see a pair of filmmakers totally upend our expectations of how a western like this is supposed to wrap up.
It's true though. I mean, sometimes it just... I remember this one that I always laugh. See, because it's funny. It's in 21 Jump Street where there's the scene in the cars, they're driving and they're going like past the a truck with the gas bottles, and that doesn't explode, and then they go by the something else that usually would explode really quickly and all that, and they're going by and nothing explodes because they're kind of afraid they're gonna explode and they're gonna finish up the chase, and then they're going past a truck that was having loads of live chickens on that exploded very badly. It was just freaking hilarious. So anyway, yeah, a lot of those. I mean, I haven't seen all of the movies, so I can't really say. Now, obviously, they kind of spoiled to me. But yeah, it's just something that sometimes it's nice not to have that ending that you expect because it's a cliche. cliche, and basically, oh yeah, this is where it's going. Sometimes I'm at that stage of my life that if I see some, let's say, show or something like that, and it's just going but cliche by cliche, and it's just basically I kind of know what's gonna happen next, I just stop watching it, because honestly, it's just not worth it. There's other things that are better made than to watch, that I rather spend time on than actually just watching something that I know exactly what's gonna happen. Unless it's a book adaptation, then I'm probably gonna watch it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow. Bye.